Hello and welcome back to part 2. We're going to go on to look at some terms relating to child sexual abuse. It's important for you to learn these names because it is happening in our society. We need to be able to understand the correct words and terms in case we see something that needs to be reported. But we've also got to be very careful not to victim blame. So you can see some headlines there. These headlines are completely unacceptable, but of course they were made to sell newspapers. So I'm just going to pick out a couple. So if you can see the one that says football stars on trial over underage hooker. This clearly blames the child. The footballers are stars and they've done nothing wrong, whereas a slur for sex workers has been used against the child. We'll talk more about prostitution on the next slide, but this is very clearly abuse. This would not have been the second one, this would not have been her first sexual encounter. It doesn't matter if it's a first or a 50th. That's her business, not everyone else's. He's not a dangerous paedophile, he is a sad, immature man. The girl was not an unwilling partner. If this person has been abusing an underage child, then the term paedophile is applicable here. Again, it implies that the child is to blame. Depending on her age, she may not have been old enough to legally give consent. All of these headlines blame the victim. To celebrate the fact that they're football stars, why does that make any manner of difference whatsoever? The Bristol girl on the run with the older man, that's abduction. Okay, so child pornography. It's no longer considered an acceptable term. Using the word pornography or porn legitimises the images, where they're actually permanent records of child sexual abuse. The images or videos should be referred to as child sexual abuse material or child sexual abuse images. People under 18 cannot legally take part in or view pornography. We know that lots of young people learn about sex from porn, but it's a totally unrealistic view of sex and relationships. It's staged and the people are professional actors. Children cannot take part in any pornographical activities. Child prostitution, again, this term is no longer considered to be acceptable. It implies that the child has a choice, whereas they don't. We use an umbrella term, commercial child sexual exploitation, because that's more appropriate. It can cover lots of different things, such as child prostitution, trafficking, forced marriage, child sex tourism, and child sexual abuse materials. We don't expect you to have a full understanding of all these terms, we just want you to be aware of them, just in case you need to report something. These things are all classed as commercial child sexual exploitation because somebody is making a profit from it, usually not the person that is involved in it. Revenge porn is something that we're seeing a lot more in the media. It isn't the most appropriate term to use. Again, using the word porn implies that there's an element of choice there. The person involved may have consented to the images being taken if they're over 18, but probably not to having them shared with the entire world. The appropriate term in this case is image-based sexual abuse. If the person in the images is under 18, then it's child sexual abuse material, whether or not it has been posted for revenge. Hopefully your selfies are as innocent as the one in the slide that you can see there. However, lots of teenagers have sent or received nudes or other inappropriate images showing parts of their body. If someone asks you for a nude, refuse, because laws will be broken. If you're pressured into sending one, consider how you would feel if it ended up all over the internet or if everybody in school had seen it. If someone sends you a nude of a person under the age of 18 and you screenshot it, you are breaking the law whether you send it on or not. It's known as making an indecent image. It's a criminal offence if the person pictured is under 18. If the person pictured is over 18 and consented to the photo being taken, that's okay because they have given consent. However, again, they may not have consented to it being sent to everyone, and those images still cannot be sent to children. Child trafficking happens in a number of countries around the world, and the UK is no different. It refers to the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harbouring or receipt of persons for the purpose of exploitation. It's almost always done under the threat of violence or coercion. People may be forced to sell goods, drugs or sex. It often involves people who have moved countries looking for a better life and have been forced to pay off their debt to the traffickers. As you can see there, 30% of all human trafficking victims are children. These are children that are potentially being taken away from their homes and their families, sent to another country, and then are then forced to be sex workers, forced to sell drugs, or forced to do other illegal activities for these gangs. This form of abuse occurs when there's any kind of physical, sexual, emotional or financial abuse or coercive control exercised between children. It includes bullying, cyberbullying, sexual violence, harassment and sexting. 20-30 years ago, if you asked people about abusive peer relationships, they would have said that it doesn't happen. Of course it happened. It just wasn't understood for the problem that we know it to be. It can be very harmful to both the perpetrator, who's also a child, and to the victim. The behaviour might be intimate or non-intimate. If you look in the corner of the slide, you can see some phrases. These are examples of abusive behaviour. "You'd do it if you loved me" is emotional blackmail. Calling someone frigid because they don't want to engage in sexual activity is abuse. "They're not consenting, drop it and move on." Don't pressure them into anything. And just because you've done something before doesn't mean you have an automatic right to do it again. It's important that we get to grips with peer-on-peer abuse. Anybody who is abusive as a young person in a relationship could then go on to continue to abuse people when they are an adult and be a perpetrator of domestic violence, which obviously carries various prison sentences. Coercive control is an element of abuse, and it's now a criminal offence. It's an act or pattern of acts of assaults, threat, humiliation and intimidation or other abuse that is used to harm, frighten or punish the victim. It creates invisible chains around a person and an overwhelming sense of fear. It works to deprive victims of their liberty and reduce their ability to act against an abuser. As with all forms of abuse, the victims can be men or women. The perpetrators can also be men or women. Less men report this as a concern than women. It's very important that men feel able to come forward in these situations and not be labelled as weak. They aren't weak, they're being abused. You may have seen examples of grooming previously. It's where individuals or gangs pressure young people into illegal activities. The young people are often bought gifts, phone top-ups, shoes, clothes, alcohol, drugs, food as well, whilst building a relationship with the child. There's always a power imbalance. The young people are unlikely to be able to see it. The groomer might say, "Oh yeah, I'm your boyfriend now," and these young people feel quite flattered by that. They're excellent at manipulating young people. They're also fantastic at picking out the most vulnerable young people, the ones who are desperate for that little bit of extra attention because they've got potentially a difficult situation at home. And these people will exploit that to the maximum level. The grooming could lead to the young people being forced to do something that they don't want to do, either criminally or sexually, to pay the perpetrator back. So this feeds in to some headlines that you're going to see. These are all examples from UK media where there has been a grooming case. You may be aware of the case in Rochdale a few years ago, where lots of young people were being abused by these gangs. As with the last set of headlines though, these are designed to sell newspapers. They use inflammatory language and stir up a sense of outrage. 3 of the pictures focus on the perpetrators. Only 1 focuses on the victims and why nobody acted to protect them. It is good that attention's drawn to the crime to make people aware of it, but then the focus should become where people can get support if they've been a victim or if they know victims. The Home Office reported in December that the majority of child sexual abuse gangs are made up of white men under the age of 30. However, the newspapers tend to focus on the groups of Asian men who have set up these gangs. If you look at the slide in the top left corner where you can see the number 47, it says 47 victims of Asian sex monsters. This fuels hatred and ill feeling among different ethnicities, and it is totally unnecessary. Yes, this particular group was a group of Asian men, but as I've said, we know that most of these groups are made up of young white men. If you see any headlines like this, please always try to consider what else might be going on. These people want to sell their newspapers, and the best way to do that is to get the biggest, most exciting headline that they can possibly think of. Unfortunately, they're not always accurate. Child sexual exploitation and child criminal exploitation both have big issues. For sexual exploitation, nobody chooses to be raped or assaulted by a gang. It's very important to remember that these people are victims. The gangs will either exploit the children sexually or criminally, the children are groomed, they're forced to undertake activities, and they're often too scared to report it. In some cases, especially for criminal activity, there's often an element from the gangs of, if you tell anybody, I'm going to break your mum's legs, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to firebomb your house. And they are genuinely too frightened to report the abuse. If you think you can see evidence of abuse somewhere, whether you have the proof for it or not, please tell somebody in school. All of the school staff have child protection training, and they will know what to do next or who to talk to next if you bring your concerns to them. There's some resources here which your teachers will be able to signpost you towards, of where you can get extra help and support. So for example, I work for Step 2, the organisation at the top there. We are an organisation that help with mental health and sexual health. You can see all of our social media pages there on our website if you need to visit us for any support. There's also a couple of links to websites that may be able to help you. So the top one on gender identity, that is an NHS website. And it does say trans teenager there, but it's for anybody who's questioning their identity. So it may be quite a useful site for you. You've got some basic terms on the next one. Remember at the beginning I said that there were more terms relating to gender and sexuality, and you'll find some of them on there. The next one down is an A to Z of terms from the Stonewall website. Stonewall have a lot of support to offer for young people who may be gay or lesbian, or they may be transsexual, or they may still just be questioning where they fit in the world. If you have concerns and you don't know where to turn to, you can ring Childline. Or if you are struggling with your mental health as a result of changes in your identity or not understanding your identity, you can of course contact Young Minds. There are lots of other resources available to you. Your school staff will be able to point you in the direction of any others that they are aware of. The most important thing is that if you need to talk to somebody, you find the right person for you. So you don't necessarily have to go to a member of the pastoral team. You don't have to go to one of the designated child protection officers. As long as you go to somebody, any adult in school or Childline, you can ask for help and support, and it will be given in confidence. Please remember to seek out any support wherever you need it. Thank you.